shut this and you guys are good to go.
Alright, so we got to start with preliminary questions. We have to last name, first name, middle initial, spelling and stuff.
My last name is Strattman, S-T-R-A-T-M-A-N. First name Henry, middle initial or name William, and I go by Hank.
And then what year were you born?
I was born in 1950
Alright.
in Marys County, Vienna, Missouri, just down the road.
Did you always want to have a career in the military?
No, when I graduated high school, the Vietnam War was going hot and heavy, and I was destined perhaps to serve in Vietnam as an enlisted, but I chose to go to college at Lincoln University because if I was going to go to Vietnam, I wanted to go as an officer where I had a little control of my destiny. My career aspirations at that time was to be a high school coach and ultimately maybe a college coach. I was an athlete in my high school days, and that was my career intentions when I graduated high school. And when I went to Lincoln University, that was my degree, was in health and physical education.
But what sport?
I played baseball, basketball, and track. We didn't have football, and I would have played it too.
So where were you living when you first joined? It's still in Vienna?
No, I lived up here in Jefferson City. I got married when I was a sophomore in college. Had my first child a year later, and my wife and I funded my college education and worked full time to put myself through college. So when it came time to graduate in late '72, I took an active duty commission because at that time you were required. Because the Vietnam War was going on, I had a college deferment. You either went to the war, or you went to college, or you got married. You got a marital deferment. That's the way it was in my generation growing up when I was your age. I chose to go to college, get a degree, and go become commissioned as a second lieutenant in the field artillery, one of the 3 combat arms.
So you went to Lincoln and then University of Southern California?
Well, yeah, I went to
Where's
Lincoln and got my undergraduate's degree. I did not get my master's degree until about 10 years later as part of my advanced career educational development within the military structure. One of the stationed at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, going to the Command General Staff College. That's when I also worked at night and got my master's degree from the University. I've never been on campus in California.
So you volunteered, or were you?
Well, it's kind of a hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, when I graduated in '73, our president and the administration had realized that Vietnam was a lost cause, and they had made the decision to draw down and walk away,
yeah,
fundamentally from Vietnam. So at the same time, the Soviet Union threat in Europe was escalating. And so I chose to come on active duty and serve versus taking a reserve component command where you serve 6 months and then you're a reservist for 6 years. I wanted to see what was out there because I knew what was here in Jeff City for me if I stayed. I wanted to check things out in the world, and I was married, had 1 child and another one on the way. So basically a lot of it had to do with being able to support my family and have a career. So I kind of volunteered, but I never intended to have a career in the military. That was, when I was your age, the military was not trusted. The government was not trusted, especially out here in the Midwest.
Was that because of Vietnam?
That was part of it. Part of it was all the strife and the racial and drugs and all that movement that went on in the 60s and the 70s. And it could be traced back to the Korean War and the World War II era. You know, my parents were in the World War II Korea era generation, so they were kind of tired of wars, and especially wars that were not decisively finalized, like Vietnam and Korea.
So did you have basic at Fort Leonard Wood?
I trained there at Fort Leonard Wood a little bit during my college ROTC days, Reserve Officer Training Corps days, but my basic training after I was commissioned was at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, the home of the field artillery, which I was an artillery lieutenant, commissioned that. But my first assignment in the military was at Fort Benning, Georgia, Army Airborne School, where first 5 times I took off in an airplane and never got to land. I had to jump out. So that was quite an experience for a foreign boy from Marys County.
So, you said you didn't want to make a career as a military. What was your goal? Just to get in and make money and get out?
Well, I wanted to see whether or not the military was a good fit for me. And as I got into the military and got into leadership positions, whether a platoon leader or company commander, or the more I got into leading and training and disciplining my enlisted soldiers, the more I realized that working in the military as a leader is similar to being an athletic coach of a high school or a college level team, depending upon the grade you're at the time. So I was a good fit for the military because of my athletic background and my leadership skills, and my maturity was fairly high, but having worked through college and already had a wife and kids. So I was a good fit early on, and my bosses recognized that, and the more I succeeded, the more challenges they put on my plate. So it just kind of kept growing, and I thrived on that, okay? I kind of like to be challenged.
Where were you first stationed after completing basic?
My first tour was in Germany. I was a platoon leader in the Lance missile system, which is a tactical nuclear missile system that we employed in Europe, primarily Germany. It was a new system. That and Pershing was there, but that was my first assignment, and we were handling and securing and able to employ nuclear weapons if the Soviet Union advanced and attacked Western Europe. Thank God that never happened, but we were prepared, because we had about 500,000 troops in Europe, especially Germany, to stand down the Soviet Union.
Was that the only combat tour, or were there?
Well, that wasn't considered combat, because my wife was able to join me there with our family, so it was not considered direct combat at that time. So, but the potential was always there as we trained and prepared to go to war if needed, if attacked. You asked about combat tours.
Yeah.
My first combat tour was as a Lieutenant Colonel Field Artillery Battalion Commander, stationed in Europe, stationed in Germany, Baumholder, Germany, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and basically took over the country. And President George W. Bush, the first George Bush, declared that wouldn't stand, and he deployed forces there to stop the spread of Iraq's leadership from expanding into Saudi Arabia and other parts of the Mideast. My artillery battalion deployed from Germany as part of 7th Corps, which was the major corps that was sent to conduct the offensive operation to defeat Saddam's army in Kuwait and get them out of the country of Kuwait and reestablish that government of Kuwait. We deployed on Christmas Day and arrived in Saudi Arabia about a day later, and waited at the Khobar Towers area for our equipment to come in on the ships, and then we deployed out to the desert and supported 3 different divisions' main efforts. I was part of the Corps Artillery Brigade, which gets moved around to the main efforts of the divisions that are doing the fight. I'll talk a little bit more about it and we'll move on. We first supported the 3rd Cav Division's feint at the Wadi, which was a diversionary feint, and the 1st Infantry Division did the main breach and attack on G-Day, which was attack day, and then we supported that, fired the prep, and moved through the breach the first night, and then the second day we were released to catch the 3rd Armored Division, which was doing a big end-around sweep, And we linked up with them just as they made contact with the Republican Guard, and we fired artillery fires for them to support as they engaged the Republican Guard all the way into Kuwait. So had a great time. Had 633 soldiers with me, and I did not lose a soldier throughout the 6-month deployment there to my first combat experience. So I'm very proud of that.
Would you consider that one of your best accomplishments?
It's one of my major ones, yes. One of the most memorable ones because I knew almost all my soldiers and I had a lot of direct personal contact with them. And my wife knew their families, and she had a harder job staying back in Germany, keeping them calm and supported. And because this was our first war since Vietnam, and there was not a lot of family structures in place to take care of the families. But that was her job, and she had a tough job. Did it very well.
So you mentioned the Kuwait. Was that part of Desert Storm?
That was the Operation Desert Storm, Desert Shield, yes.
And were you in charge of that, or?
No, I was a battalion commander now. We had about 400,000 Army troops deployed there. Lots of units. We overwhelmed them with excessive combat capability, which is one of many that participated in this operation. So I primarily supported 3 different divisions as a reinforcing artillery battalion commander for a brigade combat team.
So you had the motto, "Be all you can be."
And that's not my motto.
That's not your motto?
That was the Army's motto.
The Army's motto.
When almost for 15, 20 years, basically through my early days in the military. I'll say the first 15 years of it. And it was pretty simple, but sent a clear message, regardless of your education level. You know, not everybody could be a leader. We needed followers. You know, we needed mechanics. We needed cooks. We needed clerks. You know, we needed truck drivers. So whatever your talent was, you know, give it your best. It mainly also meant give 100% all the time. So yeah, I still throw that word out there, that motto out there frequently when I talk to young people, because it's important that our youth strive to excel, not to get by, not to get a free ride, not to have it easy. They need to strive to be value added to whatever organization, military or civilian, that they find themselves in. Because if they're not, they're a drag on that organization and society in general. So be all you can be is a good model to put in your little rucksack there and remember that, both of you.
And you mentioned bringing back all of your 600 soldiers back.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of your most enduring memories. Did you have any others that stood out?
Well, okay, phase forward now. I was a lieutenant colonel when I was battalion commander in Desert Storm. My next major deployment was not to a combat zone, but it was real close. It was peacekeeping operations in Bosnia. The UN unperformed mission failed whenever Yugoslavia split up, and we had Serbs, Muslims, and Croats slaughtering each other. The UN sent in a peacekeeping force from mainly out of Western Europe. They failed, and ultimately we, the United States, got involved during President Bill Clinton's days, and he sent in a division, heavy division out of Germany to separate the forces and enforce the Dayton Peace Accord that was established by the political leadership of those factions. My job, went in on the initial entry force. It was from Germany. It was me, a 1-star general, I was a colonel then, a major, command sergeant major, senior enlisted soldier, and a couple security guards, enlisted troops. We flew in to relieve the UN in, again, December, coldest part of the year I think it was that would have been 95, 96 time frame. Yeah. But, so we relieved the UN, and then my job specifically for the division I was chief of the Joint Military Cooperation Organization. I coordinated all the meetings with the Serb, Muslim, and Croat warring faction generals, with my general, General Bill Nash, who was the division commander, and we basically gave them their instruction. We had a new sheriff in town, and it was called the U.S. Army, and told them what to do, what they couldn't do, when they were going to do it, and if they did, we were going to kick their ass. Okay? And they got the message. And so we created the rules and the measures that would separate those three ethnic groups that wanted to reestablish their medieval boundaries and have their own little countries, which ultimately they did. We have Republic of Srpska, we have Bosnia for the Muslims, and then we have Croatia got back into their box. They're part of Yugoslavia. So that's a long story, but yeah, that's also memorable. I was there for 6 months straight, and then came back to the States, served in Washington, D.C. for 2 years at the Defense Security Cooperation Agency, and then went back the second time and ran operations in Sarajevo, where I was in charge of the entire country's military operations. It was a multinational force, Brits, French, Germans, Spanish, Italians, Italian Caribbean area, so I was in charge of operations. So that was kind of, wasn't fun at the time, but it was a challenge. Again, I mentioned earlier, I thrive on being challenged.
So what was the last operation you were involved in?
Following 9/11's attack. At that time I was the acting chief of staff of Training and Doctrine Command called TRADOC at Fort Monroe, Virginia, just south of the Pentagon, about 100 miles. And 2 months later I was assigned to be the Deputy Commanding General for Support of 3rd Army, which was the Central Command's Land Component Command, which soon became Coalition Forces Land Component Command, because coalition was more than just U.S. It meant French and British and Kuwaitis and other Saudis, others that joined the coalition. So it's called Coalition Forces Land Component Command. I was a Deputy Commanding General for support. So my job was to coordinate all the support and sustainment operations while we fought the Taliban in Afghanistan, and at the same time, and supported primarily the Special Forces camps. We ran the base camps that the Special Forces operated out of in Afghanistan and Uzbekistan and Pakistan. One interesting one was there was an airfield in Pakistan that the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, launched the Predator, armed Predator drone from. My unit, my command, we ran that camp for them. We fed them, we secured it, we maintained that whatever equipment that we were capable of maintaining, but that was really a top secret operation, but it was deep in Pakistan, but near the Afghanistan border. So that's what I did is in support of Afghanistan. At the same time, there was rumblings in Washington, D.C. about taking Saddam's regime down in Iraq. So at the same time, we military guys were reading the tea leaves, and we started planning to prepare that, because having been in the first Gulf War, we had a lot of shortcomings. Fortunately, Saddam was an easy target then, Kuwait, his military. This would not be as easy a task, and we had to do it with fewer forces. My job was to set up the theater stance. That is, upgrade the airports, the seaports, the fuel distribution system, the command and control system, the bed-down campsites for the troops, so when we did flow large numbers through there, they had a staging area to get their equipment organized, get prepped up and trained up, and then be prepared to attack. So that was my job during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and Afghanistan was Operation Enduring Freedom. So it's kind of, again, challenging. I was doing what I had been trained to do and applying lessons learned from the first Gulf War, having been just one of the many units in the first Gulf War. Now I was in a position where I could favorably influence multiple units to enhance their success, and knowing what they were going to have to go through and do.
Do you ever get back with any of the other men you served?
We did initially when I retired, but having moved here to central Missouri, it gets harder and harder. because everybody kind of goes back to their own communities and establishes their second life after the military. Some stay within the defense industrial base industry, others become consultants, some become political narratives you see on TV, talking heads, you know. I always said that when I got out of the military, I was going to come back to Missouri and not become a beltway bandit kind of guy that just had to subsist off of the defense industry. And I've done that, coming back here to my home state of Missouri, where I have family and some high school friends still around.
You mentioned retiring and then coming back to Missouri. Where were you when you first came back?
Well, all right, one more step. I retired and my last assignment was in Baghdad, where we stood up the U.S. Embassy in 2004, 2005 time frame. And that was my 4th year in the Mideast, and so I was ready to come home. When we came home, we had already purchased property here in north of Holt Summit in Callaway County, a small farm, 64 acres, and we built a house and settled in there, and that's where we still live today. But in retirement, I started my own business of property management and development and restoration of historic property called Cottage Industries, and by restoring a hotel-motel complex in the pride part of town, let me call it that, here in Jeff City. And today it's a thriving destination point for visitors and people that want to get out and socialize and shop, get their hair done, or buy some art. So I'm real proud of that second career as well.
You mentioned you had 4 years in Iraq. Was that the longest you ever, at one point?
Yeah, it was not totally straight through consistent, but 2 years in Iraq/Afghanistan, then I went to Turkey for a year, and then from Turkey I went to Baghdad for a year. So yeah, that was, overall it was the longest deployment time frame.
So while you were away, did you wrote letters back to Linda and the kids?
Initially, in the early days, like Desert Storm, we did. That was our only form of communications, was what we now today call snail mail. In fact, my wife didn't get any letters from me for 2 months when I first deployed from Germany for Desert Storm, but all of a sudden she got 15 or 20 of them, because this mail system is archaic in those days. Now today, toward the end of my tour there in Iraq and Afghanistan, I had internet connectivity, where that was how we communicated more so than letters. Occasionally a birthday card or anniversary card, just to stay out of trouble with the missus. But now today they Skype, they tweet, and they do a whole bunch of things that are soldiers do in order to communicate with their family members. It's much more capable of using technology, obviously.
So over your 33 years, was there anything that noticeably stood out to you about what you had accomplished?
Well, in the military, especially in my generation, we reestablished the credibility of the armed forces. In my case, the Army. Coming out of Vietnam, the government, the people had lost trust and confidence in their military. We reestablished that. And it first was demonstrated how handily we won Desert Storm. And then subsequently to that, that's when the American population basically fell in love again with their military. It's a startup. And today they still respect it. They don't love us all the time. Sometimes we fail, but very seldom. And I'm real proud of that, being part of that. But it was a huge team effort, huge team effort. The military is a team of teams by exponential of 1,000 times. Today we call it joint. Joint meaning the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marine Corps, Coast Guard. All 5 of those services have to be integrated and synchronized. And each one is capabilities get brought to bear at the right time, the right place, for the right reasons. And so proud to be that. I'm proud today to see that we have some of my general officer contemporaries that are retired are now in high places in the Trump administration's government. Joe Mathis, McMaster. I did not know Kelly, but those two I know. They kind of grew up with us and served together in many of the conflicts I just spoke about. So, but what's most rewarding is when young troops that you have trained and disciplined succeed. They be all they can be, and you help them do that by setting high performance standards and just hard work and commitment.
That's all the questions I had.
That's
Is there
all the
anything else you
questions.
wanted to
What about
add?
you, Jake? Yeah, you've been awful quiet over there.
Yeah.
Let me just make a quick closing statement. We kind of brushed past how difficult it is for a military family to make a career in the military. If a marriage is shaky when they get into the military, it probably won't last. But sound marriages with both the spouse and the service member recognizing their responsibilities and challenges and independence. You have to have a lot of independence. Now, my wife is as much responsible for my success as I am, because it's a family team. And in today's military, especially the Army, it's most 60% are married. They have kids of all ages. They go to schools. They have ball games, things, all things that the military spouse, it's a female military spouse, miss. And so the other parent has to fill the gaps and fill the voids and deal with all of the problems that normally a couple would deal with, which makes it much simpler. But having said that, and we always say that in the Army that the spouses, being an Army wife is the hardest job in the service. It's much harder. And they don't have any fun. They don't get paid. And frequently their career progression is restricted because of our mobility and our moving around. And so they're going to sacrifice a lot to be a military spouse. And anything else? Well, I want to thank you all.
Thank you.
I hope you learned something from this endeavor and challenge you to be all you can be.
Thank you.
Okay, whether it's in the military or not, okay? But having said that, we need good quality troops of character of all ranks, enlisted and officer. All right, so give it a thought when the time comes. But I would encourage you to get a college degree and come in as an officer if you're qualified to do that. But if not, enlisted is a good place to grow too, because we expect all our enlisted soldiers to get a degree if they stay in. To become a non-commissioned officer at staff sergeant rank, which is you get sergeant and staff sergeant, if you don't have at least 2 years of college, you won't make promoted to staff sergeant. And you won't make the next rank without a full college degree. And so they have opportunities while you're serving to do that online and other ways. So keep growing and getting educated and become more value added to wherever you end up in whatever career field. All right? That's my challenge to you. All right, thank you. Thank you.